After spouting so much loving dross, Lysander's transformation following Puck's application of the love juice into Helena lover and Hermia hater is deeply comic. What provides so much enjoyment to the audience is that the contrast between his feelings is so great and so sudden. Before going to sleep, Lysander vows to remain loyal to Hermia forever.
Amen to that fair prayer, say I, and then end life when I end loyalty.
His words are unequivocal. The repeated references to Amen and prayer give a religious seal and zeal to his vows. He is even prepared to die if he should ever show unfaithfulness. Yet after sleeping and having Puck erroneously apply the love juice meant for Demetrius, look at what he says about Hermia. For, as a surfeit of the sweetest things, the deepest loathing to the stomach brings. Or as the heresies that men do leave are hated most of those they did deceive. So thou, my surfeit and my heresy, of all be hated, but the most of me. Lysander is trying to use logic here, stating that if you have too many sweet things, you get incredibly sick of them, which is certainly true enough. He also argues that people who have been taken in by heresies or evil opinions react against them most vigorously when they realise that they have been conned. And there is also truth in this, as often shown nowadays by escapees from various religious cults. Lysander uses this rationale to conclude that he has had far too much of Hermia as a person who has deceived him with her sweet, suckling sickliness. In fact, so much that she is to be hated the very most by him. This is such an extreme contrast to his previous attitude that the audience can't help but laugh. But Shakespeare is also illustrating once again the potential irrationality and power of love. Yes, in this case, Lysander's transformation is caused by the love flower. But can we not also recall cases from our own past in which our feelings have altered rapidly, seemingly without rhyme or reason? Love has no logic, irrespective of whether magic fairies have been at work. Yet Shakespeare's use of contrast does not always result in humour. Whereas Lysander ends Act 2 by dashing off in passionate search of Helena, his previous objet d'amour is left bewildered and afraid to wake up alone in a dark forest following a terrible nightmare. Her series of panicky questions remain unanswered before she declares in a soliloquy, "I swoon almost with fear," and heads off into the darkness with a concluding line, "Either death or you are fined immediately." Swoon is an old-fashioned verb suggesting to faint or suddenly fall unconscious. Left alone so suddenly, Hermia feels that she can hardly remain upright with the shock of her apparent abandonment. Meanwhile, the options of death or Lysander shows both the utter dependence she feels she has on a man who has just dismissed their past relationship as tedious minutes and the potential peril of her situation. Now, the audience know that, under the occasional watchful eye of Oberon and amidst the light-hearted mood of the play, Hermia is unlikely to come to any genuine harm. Nonetheless, it is difficult not to feel some sympathy for a woman who has previously experienced the joy of faithful love and commitment, but is about to undergo the utterly contrasting pains of desertion and rejection. Indeed, this woman is so convinced of Lysander's loyalty to her that she would believe as soon this whole earth may be bored and that the moon may through the centre creep, and so displease her brother's noontide with the antipodes. In other words, Hermia would sooner believe that the moon would somehow make a hole through the earth in order to join the sun on the other side than Lysander reveal himself unfaithful. Well, she has a shock coming. I've previously discussed the contrast between the workman's understanding of the theatrical experience and the audience's, and this theme is developed further in Act 3. Fears about scary lions upsetting ladies in Act 1, Scene 2 have spiralled to include anxiety about Pyramus killing himself on stage, and so Bottom devises a solution and self-confidently proclaims to his fellows,
"I have a device to make all well. Write me a prologue. Let the prologue seem to say we will do no harm with our swords. And the Pyramus is not killed indeed. And for the more better assurance, tell them that I, Pyramus, am not Pyramus, but Bottom the Weaver. This will put them out of fear."
So in other words, Bottom's proposal is to unwittingly dilute any dramatic tension that might have arisen in their production by stating in the first seconds of the play what every single audience member will already know, that he isn't literally going to die. Furthermore, the additional clause giving his real name and profession hilariously implies that his acting may be so blindingly realistic that his first categorical statement about not really being killed may not be sufficient to convince Theseus and the other nobles of his future well-being. But what Bottom doesn't realise is that by insisting on lengthy, totally unnecessary explanations about the difference between their acting and real life, he will be making himself an object of ridicule, albeit a fairly amiable one. There is a misplaced confidence in Bottom's confident statements that contrasts enormously with how he will be perceived when his play is indeed put on in Act 5. Shakespeare's combining of different characters from different spheres provides the drama of the first scene of the play as young and old go head-to-head in a potentially catastrophic dispute about the rights of a woman to determine her own destiny. In Act 2, fairies secretly spy on the youthful humans, and although their intentions are benign, their actions result in dramatic changes in the lovers, love turning to hate and security turning to despair. In Act 3, Shakespeare brings the workmen and the fairies together for the first time, and the result is mischief followed by further contrasts, both in the way Bottom is perceived by his fellows, and also by Titania, Queen of the Fairies. Puck uses his magical powers to plonk an ass head on Bottom's head, and within seconds, Bottom goes from revered spiritual leader of the amateur dramatists to object of abject terror. Previously, the respect in which he was held by his fellow workmen could be summed up in Quince's cheerful description of him as Bully Bottom. The alliterative prefix bully is one of hearty appreciation. Bottom is one of their own, a good man to be trusted and counted upon. Contrast this to how the men react when he appears with an ass head on.
Monstrous! Oh, strange! Fly, masters, we are haunted!
The men cannot get away from Bottom fast enough, and the desperate exclamations of "oh" and frantic imperative "fly" within the shortest sentence possible show their uncontrollable feelings of horror towards the changed man they previously looked up to so deferentially. Contrast their reaction to Titania as she, like Lysander, falls victim to Oberon and Puck's love potion.
What angel wakes me from my flowery bed?
It would be difficult to think of a less apt description for Bottom than angel, especially now he has a pair of donkey's ears attached to his head, and the contrast between the reactions of the men fleeing as fast as possible and Titania praising Bottom so lavishly and lovingly provides great humour. In Hoffman's production, Titania, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, seems like a goddess from a dream, sensually covered in bridalesque white lace, with blonde hair and perfect Botox complexion. Yet she goes even further than branding Bottom totally inappropriately following his singing, and after seeing him, she declares,
"And thy fair virtues, force perforce, doth move me on the first view to say, to swear, I love thee."
Titania's poetic rhyming couplet and intensifying of the verb she uses to proclaim her love, from say to swear, shows a hilarious utter confidence and finality about her new feelings for this awful-looking creature. And although this misplaced self-assurance stems from Oberon and Puck's trickery, surely Shakespeare is once again commenting upon the irrationality of love, just as Lysander's transformation from Hermia devotee to Helena devotee reflects the potential in all of us to suddenly be bewitched by the physical charms of someone we previously hadn't considered. So Titania's abrupt hero worshipping of Bottom illustrates an important truth. Love is always in the eye of the beholder. What one person finds attractive, another can find gross and totally repulsive. Needless to say, in A Midsummer Night's Dream, the entanglement of the lovers are eventually resolved. Titania returns to Oberon, Lysander to Hermia, and Demetrius' eyes permanently open to the charms and devotion of Helena. Shakespeare then brings the old and young generations back together in Act 4, which are contrasted rather daringly in Hoffman's production by the use of clothing and nudity. In Shakespeare's original text, Theseus, Hippolyta and Aegeus are in the vast grounds of Theseus's palace to hear the baying of his hounds. However, they come across Hermia, Lysander, Helena and Demetrius asleep. Let's see Theseus's reaction in Hoffman's production.
Good morrow, friends. St. Valentine is past. Begin these wood birds but to couple now? I pray you all. Stand up.
In Shakespeare's day as now, the feast of St. Valentine was associated with love and mating. Theseus's reference to St. Valentine being passed is a gentle rebuke to the obviously compromising position the lovers find themselves in. However, by labelling them metaphorically as woodbirds, Theseus is also drawing attention to the naturalness of a desire to procreate or couple, whether you are a woodbird or indeed a human being. A convenient attitude given his approaching wedding night with Hippolyta. The effect of Hoffmann having the four lovers naked bar some strategically positioned rose petals, which strengthen the link between sexual consummation and nature, is to reaffirm the vigour of youth, which contrasts enormously with the buttoned-up rage of the older generation and their desire to repress, as represented by Aegeus. He is quick to interrupt the lovers' dreamy storytelling.
Enough! My lord, you heard enough. I beg the law upon his head.
The repetition of enough is fury and desperation itself, whilst the jagged, broken syntax, as shown in I beg the law, contrasts enormously with Lysander's previous measured, dreamlike speech, and shows that Aegeus is himself beginning to lose control. This is fitting, as his own control of Hermia is approaching an end. Aegeus is overruled, which leaves 3 weddings to celebrate in Act 5, and Bottom's play to enjoy. As would be expected from their rehearsals, there is a huge contrast between the usual effect of a tragedy and Theseus, Hippolyta and the four lovers' reactions. Far from being sucked into the typical emotional ringer that is a classical tragedy, the audience exchange highly amused, snide remarks. Demetrius, tickled by the crude use of a man acting as a wall, declares that it is the wittiest partition that ever I heard discourse, my lord, whilst Theseus also shows detached composure to comment that the wall, methinks, being sensible, should curse again. Nonetheless, Bottom in particular takes all these comments in his stride and puts his ignorance of theatrical convention to good use by responding spiritedly to his audience as himself rather than as Pyramus. Following Theseus's comments about the wall, Bottom breaks off from character to cry earnestly, "No, in truth, sir, he should not. Deceiving me is Thisbe's cue. She is to enter now, and I am to spy her through the wall." There should be a contrast, a separation between an actor and an audience. But this is something Bottom and indeed the other cast members don't seem to realise, ultimately making them curiously endearing. There is no question that A Midsummer Night's Dream is a play of contrast. Contrast between the 4 different groups of characters and the language they use. Contrast between their perceptions of what is happening or how they should be behaving and the often comic reality. And contrast between the emotions of love and hate, beauty and unsightliness, young and old, high class and low class, humankind and the supernatural. This has been a Schofield on Shakespeare production exploring the contrast in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Thanks for watching.